Hey everyone, it is Friday. This podcast going up a little bit late. Had a few life issues going on the previous day. Could not get the intro or outro recorded, but here I am, better late than never, still on a Friday, so that's good. Got a little bit of news coming your way. Tespa, they are going to host the first ever standalone varsity series for Overwatch Collegiate Overwatch. They say Overwatch Collegiate. That's a weird order for me, but either way, doesn't matter. Any university that officially supports esports as a student activity is invited to apply, and you can go on to their Twitter at Team Tespa to get the link. It is they posted it July 31st. They don't have this one pinned. You think they would have this pinned, but they don't. But the link is at their July 31st post. You'll see it right there. It has the logo of Overwatch Collegiate Varsity Series. Go check that out. They're also hiring, by the way. Tespa's hiring. That is their pinned tweet, which I guess having employment is more important than hosting a tournament, which is why they have that one. They have that one pinned, but more power to them. Whatever works. Either way, tournament going on. That's pretty cool. I love more collegiate tournaments, and Tespa is providing right now. I also want to give a shout out to Maryville University. They are over in LICC or over in Hong Kong. Actually, I believe they're back in North America, but they made it to the finals of LICC, falling to Jimei University. I believe I pronounced that university right. But they made it to the finals, put up a valiant effort, but Jimei was just better that day. So either way, congratulations to Maryville University. You can still come home with your heads held high. You guys did great. And look forward to next year's NA results. Could be Maryville University, could be another team, who knows? But if Maryville keep playing the way they have been playing, it's probably going to be them next year as well. Guest this week is from University of Illinois, Urbana-Champaign. You've probably already guessed that, considering you see the title on the screen if you are looking at this or even gave it a glance for 1 second. It is AJ Taylor. He's a science major, a food science major. Really cool conversation I have with him. So hold on. We actually talk about esports for about 15 minutes, but the rest of it is pretty much about science, and I love it. It was about a big topic about chocolate. That's his specialty right now. He's doing a research project in chocolate, having to do with chocolate. And we go through, or rather he does, I just ask the questions. He goes through in details the history of chocolate, its significance, and a lot of the chemical reactions that you can get out of it. It's really cool. I hope you like it. I certainly loved it. It was some of the most fascinating talks I've had on here thus far. Definitely the most scientific, definitely the most educational as far as as just an overall knowledge level, or knowledge aspect, I should say. Really cool. I love this sort of thing. I do nerd out a little bit. I love physics. I love science. I love all sorts of that sort of thing. I love learning about it. Even if I don't comprehend it at first, it's still something I can reflect on, look over later. And I usually just come away. I like coming away with knowing something practical. And chocolate, it is a huge part of almost everyone's lives. And knowing its significance, knowing its history, knowing the science behind it is really cool. AJ Taylor detailed the crap out of it. Love it. Hope you do too. Here you go. Take a listen. All right, man. Hey, do you prefer AJ? Do you prefer Mr. Taylor?
Yeah.
Okay.
No, definitely fuck no, not that one. That's something that is like as a PhD person, like I don't look forward to people like, hello, Dr. Taylor. I'll just be,
You don't?
Please just call me AJ. Like I don't want to hear that. You know what I mean?
Oh my gosh. If I ever got a PhD, if I ever went for a PhD, oh man, that'd be my main focus. That'd be my main driving force, is being called doctor.
It's really nice, but like I mean, Dr. AJ's fine, or like Dr. A, I don't care. Like, but for some reason, like, I don't know, Dr. Taylor just seems really
Not your thing.
strange. Yeah, like just something that I'm not a fan of, I guess. So
Fair enough.
it is what it is. But.
Yeah, fair enough. Welcome. Thank you for being on, man. Really appreciate
Yeah, no,
this.
of course.
So one of the things that obviously I've talked to you very briefly in person at the CSL finals, not this year but last year, and like we've kind of all hovered in the same space. Obviously, Collegiate, League of Legends, CSL. I mean, that just kind of happens, and like I haven't really got to talk to you besides like that one time, and we touch base here and there on Twitter, but we don't actually talk. So I was looking forward to this one because you're obviously coaching League of Legends. You were nice when I talked to you the first time, and also you are in food microbiology and chemistry, and that absolutely fascinates me. And we can touch on this now, later, whenever, but I do want to talk about that a little bit because there is actually a lot to talk about. I mean, just with us in general being in esports and all that.
Yeah, no, of course. Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of different aspects. It's always really funny that I just recently did like a recruitment camp for our club here, basically on campus, and a lot of people were asking us like, oh, like what are just in general, like what are your guys' majors, and a lot of my players basically they kind of maintain around like the comp engineering and the computer science part, and it's really funny that it's like you get to me and it's just like, yeah, I'm in food science.
Well, that's with your the UIUC League of Legend team or like
Right,
esports.
correct.
Yeah. Okay, so that's something I've noticed too. There's so many computer science and yeah, engineers too. That's another one. But even a lot of my colleagues or business.
Yep, in business, yeah, that's another big one.
That's gotten more prevalent now that you can actually have a business with esports like that.
Right.
That wasn't so much a thing. It was still computer science and engineering here and there, but business has really popped up. But yeah, food science. No, I love that because so when I first went to college, I went to college 3 times because I hated it twice. I hated it twice. Got depressed the third time, and then I just decided to do
There's just no point. Yeah, like that.
I already have enough debt. But when I first went, I was actually going for kinesiology, which is why like the whole food science thing that like fascinated me too, because my school did not have a nutrition program. We had a nutrition class, but no program, and I would have went into that in a heartbeat over kinesiology. Kinesiology was a lot of fun whenever I studied it, but oh man, nutrition. I took the only nutrition class available, and I was like, this is fascinating. And I read up as much as I could afterward, and I did all my own things because that's what I realized I just have to do in life because I don't have the attention span or mental capacity for college, and B, I just learn better when it's my own pacing and my own subjects, my own everything. I do appreciate, now that I'm out of college, I do appreciate the all around core like curriculum that I got. Like European history, world history, sociology, especially things like that. But back that time, I just wanted to learn what I wanted to learn. I should have went to what do they call it? Technical college, I think they call them.
Yeah, the 2 year. Well, yeah, you can either do like a community college, which is just getting like an associate's, or you can get a technical degree, which is more like electrician or plumbing.
Yeah,
or,
it's almost like an apprenticeship. It's like a modern apprenticeship, is what it is. Yeah,
right. Much more hands-on focus.
I think I should have went to that when I was younger, but now that I'm out, I actually appreciate all that. I love all the math too. Like man, so many people crap on math, and I was like, I love math. I don't know if you've ever like rolled a ball down the hill and wonder how far it's going to drop, but you can do that.
No, I mean, like, it's really surprising that there's a lot of people. I mean, like, even with my idea of being a PhD student in food science, like, food science is a culmination of so many different things, with not only just biochemistry, but also plant physiology, human nutrition, which is, a culmination of, oh my gosh, you can't even, anatomy and physiology to genetics to metabolism to a lot of different things. And so for me, like, I was laughing because literally, I think like 2 or 3 days ago, I had to look at a piece of data that I was analyzing. Basically, we had to look at the area under the curve, and that's calculus, right? Like looking at the area under the curve to understand if this is important or not is a calculus-based idea. And so even though I'm in the sciences, and like, yes, I know like science and math are very highly correlated with one another. It's like if I had not taken Calc 2 and Calc 3 back in high school and college, then it wouldn't have been able to easily come to me that it's like, yes, we're looking for the area under the curve, and I know how to do that because you use an integral and blah, blah, blah.
Yeah. There's a lot of stuff in there that you could probably spout out that I probably even be a slight enthusiast, which is all I can really claim to be anymore.
Right.
I still probably wouldn't understand it. Although I did, like, my 2 favorite classes throughout my entire going through college was the nutrition class and physics. Physics was incredibly fun too, and if I would have discovered that earlier, I probably would have done something with that. But I did that toward the tail end of my second year when I was like, oh, this is probably not a good idea for me to keep going because I'm only going to this physics class. It's the only thing I like.
Right.
And I didn't drop out the smart way. That's just a lesson I had to learn, and now I'm paying back a good few grand for that.
Stay in school, kids.
Yeah. And if you don't stay in school, drop out responsibly. Don't do it like I did. So yeah.
Gracefully.
Yeah, very gracefully. So, how did League of Legends come into play with all this? Because was that one of your focuses, or was that even on the radar? Or was that just something that happened organically, and you're like, hey, I'm here, I can do this, and that sort of happened?
Right. So League of Legends started for me. I mean, in general, I think everybody it starts for video games at a very young age. I was playing the Nintendo 64. I have apparently there's a picture that my mom has that if you look at me as like a little baby, so maybe like 2 or 3 years old, the picture has me with like my hands out, and it looks like you could just fit like a Game Boy Advance like right in the middle of the hands. She says that I always had this knack for picking up games, and I would understand them within like a day or so. And I was mostly like I want to say pretty good at a lot of these games. And I was playing some tabletop role playing game, probably Dungeons and Dragons, with a bunch of friends. But in the background, they happened to have this music going on, and I was I really enjoyed it. And I don't know if you know this, but Diana's theme song, the
Yeah,
really like the opening thing, like
it's like almost operatic.
right, like
but
very orchestra.
Yeah,
it's beautiful.
It is quite moving. I do love that. Is one of the things I've always loved about League is their art, and that goes over to their music. Their music has been pretty top notch for a long time.
But so basically, he had this on the background, and like halfway through the session, we went for like get some food or get some drinks or whatever else like that, and I was just like, hey, like, like what's that game, or like what's that sound? And he kind of like introduced me. He's like, oh yeah, it's like League of Legends. It's kind of a brand new game. It's about like a year and a half old. Blah blah blah. And obviously Diana was the new champion at the time, which was about what now 7-8 years ago or so.
Yeah. Yeah.
It was a very underdeveloped game at that time, but it was basically like it was rising in popularity, and so I picked up the game and I started playing it. And, I just kind of leveled myself up to level 30, but I was very afraid because I've done a lot of PVE type or PvP type stuff, Call of Duty, Halo, and like from there, and I just kind of enjoyed playing versus bots for a while, and then at some point I joined ranked, and in season 3 I want to say I like got to platinum pretty like easily or so, and I was very surprised about that because I didn't know like what it meant at first, and then somebody was like, oh yeah, like platinum at the time was like the top 2.5 players in all of North America, and I was like, wait, you're saying like I'm actually kind of good at this game? Like what?
Yeah.
But yeah, no, it basically came out to that, and I fell in love with the game. I still to this day claim that there's never been a game that I've ever felt so much emotion, so much pride, so much anger at the same time, and sadness sometimes, but also just like really happy, fun times of just sitting there. You're playing with your friends, or you're just grinding out solo queue, and you're getting higher and higher. And I think last year I finally like capped to Diamond 4 at one point, and I was so excited because that was something that was on like my goal list. Is that I was always plat one every single season. I would end plat one. And I was like, please, like I just want to get to Diamond. I just want to break into that area. But yeah, so at some point in my undergraduate, there was like a League of Legends club, and I didn't really know that there was other people on my campus that did that. And I joined up with them, and I played some LANs. It was really fun, and I was like, wow, this is actually really good. And during that summer, after the League of Legends club that I found out, I then started doing individual coaching online, and I got paid a little bit of money, just to coach people on how to get better at the game, doing VOD reviews, doing some analytics for them. Very, very minor stuff because I hadn't really been introduced to the idea of collegiate. And then when I came to the University of Illinois at Urbana-Champaign, or UIUC, I found out that they had a League of Legends team. And not only did they have one, but we were at the time
good.
Pretty good, yeah, exactly.
I remember they were the first one to ever actually impress me. They were before like UBC started running wild and all that,
right?
And they were like before the scholarship programs. They were like the ones that really busted out during the first inaugural season. I was like, wow, these guys are good. And
so it was. I saw that and I was like, wow, I want to be a part of that. And so at first I tried out as a player because I wanted to join the B team. Kind of recognizing like everybody else is mid diamond. But I thought maybe if I join a competitive side, I can really start kind of garnering up my understanding, my ideas, and maybe become a better player because of that. And unfortunately, the B team that year that I joined kind of got left to the wayside because the main team was the main focus. And so when the next year came and I got into my second year of grad school, I was like, I want to be the coach for the League of Legends team. Like, I don't know how I can be able to do that or sway that or whatever. And I ended up talking with the manager at the time and the guy that was going to become the head coach. And both of them had seen that I was really interested, and they tried me out for a few weeks as just taking care of the B team, basically, or the academy team, we like to call it. And they thought I was really good, and they kind of just stuck from there. And then I was the head coach for the B team and the assistant coach to the main team. Kind of helped out with some of their data analytics and just helping understand more about scrims and life from there. And then we went to CSL California on our first year that the academy team was actually a legitimate thing. That was pretty much our height to success. Unfortunately, we got beat out by SFU at the time.
They were the eventual winner. They were the eventual winners, so you got beat by the champions at least.
Yeah, but it was one of those things that, like, when we were watching their games versus UBC, we were just like, oh, we can easily, like they won out versus UBC, but like they were sloppy is what we were thinking. And I mean, like, obviously they weren't, because they handed our butts to us pretty easily, but it was just one of those, like, you see that and you're like, oh yeah, we're so confident going into this matchup, like, we're gonna win.
And then it just 2020 on that one, yeah.
Right, exactly. So, but then it carried over into this year, and then we placed, I think, like 5th. Unfortunately, in CSL, we had a lot of internal issues that happened, and kind of unfortunately led to a very untimely demise. I think that we could have honestly taken the entire thing, because we had scrimmed multiple times versus RMU, and we always had the upper hand versus them. So, and RMU then became the eventual winners for this year of CSL as well. So we were very disappointed that just these conflicts happened. But that was pretty much how I got into esports and how I got into being the head coach position for an academy team.
Well, this is really convenient for you because you're going for your PhD. So if you lose 1 year, you still have about 6 more years to try.
Yeah, basically, yeah. No, like, that's the best part, is that it's like, everybody else is like, oh, I'm an undergraduate, I'm graduating, and I'm like, yeah, well, I've got a few more years, and that's okay. But
yeah, I mean, this is actually a really good position for you, because I'm assuming, you stuck with it, you're going for PhD. I'm assuming you like the food science. I'm assuming you really enjoy all that.
Oh yeah. Yeah, I have a master's in food science. I have an undergraduate in biochemistry. My research at the time was in a food science related project. I got a master's in food science now, and now I'll be finishing up a PhD by, we hope, 2022. What I'm thinking, somewhere around the line.
Okay, so yeah, you still got some time with UIUC. So I mean, there's okay. Cool. Yeah, I was wondering, because I know it says PhD student, but I'm like, that could really vary. But that's a lot of years that can be accounted for, can be unaccounted for, as far as like actual on paper. But so you still got quite a few years, and this is a really good position for you. I mean, obviously, you said you love League of Legends, so you obviously coaching is a big passion of yours. But I mean, you're still going for a PhD in something you seem to really. I mean, obviously, you just said you love too. So I mean, this is like, you're living the life, man. This is good.
Yeah, I mean, it's one of those things that it's a great job. I really enjoy it because, especially in the summer, we're not really committed to classes or the like from there. I mean, I still have to show up to work, but my professor is one of those people that it's, as long as you get the work done, it doesn't, you could be at the lab from 9 to 5, or you could be at the lab from 9 to whenever the hell you want to be. Like, she's the department head, so she's not really caring about that. But I'm always a very studious person, so I like to be there from 9 to 5, and then be like, okay, now I've done my due diligence for the day, I'm going to go home, or whatever that comes out to be. But
so you work at the university as well?
Yeah, so as the university, normally PhD students, they do, or master students as well, they do research at the university.
Oh, okay.
So you create a project, or you are given a project, depending. Master students, because they only happen to have 2 years at a university, they're normally given a project by the professor, and or they are finishing up work that a previous student may have started, for example, and then they wanted to continue along the line, but due to time constraints or financial reasons or whatever, they just ended up not, so you would continue theirs. But as a PhD student, normally you kind of come in and you're either starting your own project or figuring out from previous work what you want to work on. Is pretty much the idea. So I've been working pretty handedly on that area of my research and what my topic is going to be, figuring out experiments and what I want to run, and what do I need, what are the materials, what are the methods, doing everything that everybody learns for the scientific method of making the hypothesis, and then trying to understand the research and breaking it down of, okay, what's my experiment, what are my controls, how do I do it, and then writing it up afterwards. that's the thing that actually takes a lot of time that people don't understand so much is, writing. How do you translate your research into small tidbits of information that people can easily digest?
That's one thing I really love about science and math is that everything builds upon each other. Well, if
Oh yeah,
you go over like English and stuff like that, like, yeah, you can read Shakespeare, but it's not going to be the exact same as reading like George Orwell or something like that. It's going to be
no,
totally different, but you're still using the scientific method, which is what you learned in like the first grade or whatever.
yeah.
I absolutely love that, and that made my heart very warm. I'm so glad you said that. So are you so right now you're figuring out what you're going to be experimenting on.
It's mostly like I know what I'm going to be looking to do. So I research within chocolate itself. I look
Ooh.
at yeah, I know everybody always gives me that reaction.
Well,
It's a
because
great reaction.
chocolate itself is fascinating to me because I
Oh
can't
yeah,
think in a sober world who would think to do all that process that you do to chocolate. And I feel the same way about tequila. I feel the same way about most alcohols. Wine, I feel that way. I don't
right.
understand who was out of their mind enough to think, hey, so we talk about chocolate. You see this white crap over here? Let's do
Yeah,
something to it.
so break it down for anybody that happens to listen that may not know. So a chocolate is actually a fermented product. When you get it from the pod itself, it does not, just magically appear. Chocolate is not just something that's there.
Right.
Chocolate actually comes from cocoa pods. The pods are about like a foot and a half long or so. They're normally yellow, red, or sometimes green and orange in color, and they can kind of vary on that depending on the genetic subcluster that they are. But inside, you happen to have these beans that are filled with, or that are covered by like a white mucus. Uh,
Yeah, that's what
and
weirded me out by it. Like
right,
when I
it's
first saw
crazy.
it, that was like, what? Oh,
Right.
go on. I want to hear this. Go on.
No, no, you're good. But so if you guys have never seen cocoa beans, I suggest like go Google them or something like that, and you'll
I'll put a
see that
picture
they're
up.
covered
I'll
in
put a
that.
picture up right now.
But they're covered in like a white mucus basically, and then what happens is as the farmers they'll open up the pods and they'll scoop out the beans. The beans get inoculated by microbes, so yeasts and bacteria, basically the same yeast that you would use when you're fermenting to get wine and beer, cheeses, yogurt, anything that's a fermented food in general. And the same things that are being activated as soon as they scoop because they get the microbes either from the farmer's hands, the machete, the surrounding area, and then when they do this, they scoop them into either boxes or banana leaves, so they're getting another inoculation there. But then they ferment them for about 5 to 7 days, again depending on that genetic subcluster that we were talking about before. And then they now you have these like brown beans, and if you cut them on the inside, the mucus kind of goes away, kind of basically dissolves and become what we call sweatings, or like it's basically like a really sweet, sugary. It's all sucrose that's just been enzymatically cut, and so it's a very sweet juice that you can actually pull off, and they make like fermented soda from it. It's really insane. But then you take those beans and you lay them out and you sun dry them for maybe about a day or two, and then you can take those and now they will package them and they'll send them off to Hershey's or Barry Callebaut or any chocolate company in there. But then they kind of do different things from that part. They'll crack them open, they'll roast them sometimes, or they'll roast them with the actual shells on, and then they'll crack them. And then they start developing kind of the flavor there from that roasting process, and then they grind up the inside part, the non-shell. We like to call that the bean or the nib itself. So if you're at cocoa bean nibs, this is just a bean kind of chunked into little bits and pieces, and then they will kind of pulse that until you get kind of like a paste almost. And the reason why is because cocoa beans happen to have a lot of fat inside of it. So you're taking this kind of dry powder and you mix it with this oil and you kind of get like almost like a cake, if you could imagine that, like a hockey puck cake. And then they take the hockey puck and they will hydraulic press it to get out one of people's favorite things in the whole world. It's in your lotions, it's in your hand creams, it's in, a great smelling thing. It's called cocoa butter, and that's the
Ooh.
fat from the actual cocoa bean itself, right? But then at the same time, when they extract out this fat, they then pulse the cake. It's now dried up. It has no more fat or oil inside it, and they pulse it up again, and then you get cocoa powder, and that's straight cocoa powder. So the same cocoa powder you would get, in the Hershey's little tiny tub, basically. That's the cake without the butter. But then, in order to make chocolate, from now you have cocoa powder and cocoa butter. You now actually mix them back together in certain quantities. And the reason why is because before, when you had that cocoa powder cake, the fat was very hard to extract, and you couldn't really get it out. It would be very coarse, very kind of like sand-like, if you can imagine that. But when you extract out the butter and you mix it back in later on, you get it very smoother, makes it very kind of like crystalline, and you can granularly make it smaller and smaller in size of particles. So it doesn't get that kind of like coarse, grainy feeling. You're getting it very smooth, that kind of like liquid chocolate that you feel and see, and it's just it starts to smell amazing from that point on because I'm in the lab and we make it a lot, and it's just every single day it's just like, oh my god, I walked in.
I'm quite
To
literally already
chocolate
salivating.
But yeah, no. So then you take that and you temper it for a while, which is a process of heating it up to a certain temperature and holding it for quite a bit of time. And then you basically take that and pour it in a mold, and now you let that cool, and you get chocolate from there.
That's
You guys have never
amazing.
seen? Yeah, I know. Like it's a, and I agree. Like what you said before. Like who's the genius that thought to put all this crap together? But there's actually really funny stories about that. So the reason why is to begin with is they would take the beans, and what they used to do. These were Aztec people, Mayan people, and kind of like the indigenous people of Central and South America.
These are half my ancestors, by the way. I'm very proud. I've suddenly, I'm always proud. I'm proud of my ancestry in general because I'm like half Mexican, and I'm not the Spanish kind of Mexican. I'm like the Aztecs, and now I suddenly have a newfound appreciation. So I'm really glad we're having this conversation. Keep going, please.
No, no, of course. So basically, they used to use the pods as like ways to drink and eat out of because the pods, the leftover skin, were really nice, like little boats almost that they used to use. And so they would take the beans, and they didn't really find a use for the beans because the beans were very bitter. So they would scoop them into piles and put them on leaves because they thought that they could use them as like fertilizer or something like that. For some reason, again, that natural microbe that we were talking about before started changing the flavors. So the white mucus that they saw, these, in giant heaps of these things would go away. And then they'd see that there was no mucus left over. But then they'd have these beans, and then the beans would ferment and then dry, and then they could eat those because now they were a little bit sweeter. They weren't as bitter. And so the Mayan people used those and would grind them up and add it to water or add it with like chili and cinnamon and honey and stuff like that. And they would have a fermented, frothy, kind of like chocolatey drink. But it's not like the chocolate that you would think of like hot cocoa. It's more so of like, it's again that before the process of granulate. So it's very, still kind of like a little bit of bitterness. It's still not as super sweet because they don't have a lot of sugar and honey. But they would use that as a drink and ferment it because it had all the alcohol inside of it to get drunk. Yeah. But they revered the beans as a gift from the gods. Theobroma cacao, which is the actual name of the cacao plant itself in Latin, means food of the gods itself. And so they would have like little pouches. They would make sacrifice, like when they would give up sacrifices of just like random things. They would sacrifice beans to the gods in order to be in their favor. And so they would carry around like little golden pouches, specifically royalty, and they would trade and use cocoa beans as currency. So it's amazing that the reason why everybody is such a chocoholic now is because of this kind of legacy and this history behind it. But then my favorite part behind this is then when the Spanish Inquisition came over and conquered that side of it, when they brought back to Spain, not only did they bring back riches and the like from there, but they actually brought back cocoa beans. And they brought back the drinks because the drinks were known to be to give vitality, aka they got drunk. But they used this kind of drink, and then they started making their version of it. But then they made it hot and warm instead of like the kind of neutral temperature. And then they started making like a hot chocolate, and hot chocolate shops popped up everywhere in Europe. Like it spread like wildfire.
There's a whole movie on it, actually. Well, it's a romance movie in like the 50s or 60s.
Really?
Well, it takes place there. It has Johnny Depp. It's not in the 60s, but it's called
it.
Chocolat, and it's about an actual chocolate, hot chocolate shop. I think in France. I think.
Yeah, most likely. Because it was very much for the royalties and the like from there. Because it was, like I said, it was a very they kind of want to keep it to themselves. But there's paintings that you would see that they were drinking. Not from tea sets. You would if you looked at it, like a normal person would be like, oh, it's a tea set. But if you looked at like the cup and the design and like whatever it was, like I can't remember the exact specifications, but it was because they were actually drinking hot chocolate. And so people spread this out over a long time. And so hot chocolate became like the popular drink of the era. And then this guy, for some reason, he took the cocoa nibs that we were talking about before, and he realized that he could make cocoa butter out of it if he hydraulically pressed it, because they wanted the fat. And so when he made cocoa butter, he then made cocoa powder, and that was how he realized he could start like extracting different things from there. But for some reason, this guy like ingeniously then took the cocoa butter and the cocoa powder and mixed it back together. And then he started making like this very, like I said before, very coarse, very granule, very sandy type chocolate. That was like one of the first chocolate bars to ever exist. And so they started selling these chocolate bars in like little cakes. And the idea was you would take off the cake and then you would put it into your drink, and then you could start making the hot chocolate from there instead of having to like use cocoa nibs. And so it would dissolve a little bit easier into the water and kind of give it like a little bit more smoother of a taste and flavor. Right, I know, like it just makes no sense.
Suddenly, like Willy Wonka just seems like an amateur, just like a knockoff. Like, what is he doing? He's not doing anything relevant, nothing innovative.
But then the last step, that tempering process, was the idea this guy left on his machine instead of heating the chocolate. He kept it heating for like 24 hours. They say, it's kind of like one of those stories of like, oh yeah, he just left it on and went to bed, and then the next day he came. But apparently, like, that's what happened. And when he came the next day, he started finding this very smooth, very liquefied chocolate, and they attribute to that tempering process of the low and slow heating element in order to basically make the granule size smaller and smaller, and so it's much more smoother on the tongue and in the mouthfeel.
Which is kind of what we have now, right?
Right, and then you took that and then put it into molds, and then Hershey's took over, and they started making a huge amount of chocolate, and the Swiss got a hands of it. Man. Yeah, Barry Callebaut, and all the other wonderful companies that everybody knows.
I'm not gonna get into it on this podcast. I probably will never. But man, chocolate. I don't know if I should believe more in science or a holy entity after this. I know it says I know it's the nectar of the gods, or they sacrifice beans to the gods for this holy this holy food. My gosh.
I know. Well, I understand the idea of like making it a religious symbol, but it's so funny that they made it into a currency that, like, apparently there's a very famous story of where there's like one of the Mayan, I don't know if it was prince or like one of the chief's son, I don't know exactly what that would be, but he kept around a pouch of those cocoa beans in like a gold pouch, basically like a gold silk pouch. And it was so funny because he would easily give up the gold silk pouch, but he would not want to trade the cocoa beans for anything in his entire like. It makes no sense whatsoever. But like that at the time, like it was the thing. It was the culture. So
this may sound like it's off topic. Do you watch Star Trek?
I don't, unfortunately.
No problem. So the Ferengis in there, they have something called latinum, and they press it in their gold, or in human gold, like gold, because gold is worthless to them, but latinum's like important. This kind of reminds me of the same thing. I'm not gonna get on that tangent. That's a Star Trek. Yeah.
No, yeah, it's just cult, but it's the same thing.
It's relevant.
Like, it's cultural differences that just they make you laugh of how much people, value certain things differently depending on the culture.
That is absolutely fascinating. I am glad we brought up chocolate, because I was actually just talking about that with someone the other day. And because like mostly I don't get an educated answer like this when I say something like who thought up chocolate? Like, that is ridiculous. And then someone will try to give me an educated answer, like, well, we thought up dumplings, we thought up other things. Why couldn't we think up chocolate? Like, no, I have seen chocolate from when it first started, and there is not a way to do that without some luck involved, which, I mean, I guess obviously you just explained the way, but no one's broken it down that way, and I know we're giving the history of it, and I'm very thankful for that. Now I can stop asking that question, but now
you can spread the information.
I can spread the information.
That's the major. But to wrap it into my research, so I look at the fermentation aspect of chocolate, because that brings in the food microbiology and the food chemistry side. Because there's been a recent couple of papers that have been published that have stated that the fermentation, because it's one of the first steps within the chocolate making process, it's probably one of the most vital, if not the most vital step in order to develop the flavor. But what's really interesting is the idea of how they're natural fermentations, right? So the microbes that you're using are varied every single time. So even if you think, right, you have the same person, even if the same place, like let's say it's an equipment, same farm, he used the same box. You cannot guarantee that if he does two different batches, that they will be the exact same microbial composition from one to the next. There's no guarantee. And so if there's no guarantee that the microbial composition is going to be the exact same, that means that all of the chemicals that they're all of the flavors basically are going to be completely different as well. Is my major justification. And so what we want to look for is if we could take beans that are completely sterile, so they have no microbes in them whatsoever, and we ferment them instead of with a whole bunch of microbes or different types of microbes. What if we ferment them with just one type and see what happens when you ferment them with just one yeast?
So you think it'll get a different flavor, or is that what you're looking for?
It's not just even the different flavor, but it's more so of like classifying the flavor profiles of each of the chocolates, so that if I pick out like let's say a very recent one has stated that like different countries have different flavor profiles. Like Ecuador is very fruity, and Peru is more nutty, and Africa or West Africa is very earthy, for example.
Yeah.
Well, they say that partially that may be due to the idea of like the genetic subclusters and the type of cocoa and all the other different things. But I want to argue that maybe it's because of the microbes. Because if you think about it, each of those places, you can't guarantee that on the same farm there's going to be the exact same microbes. Think about countries, right? Like that's huge differences. And so, there's differences in temperature, differences in climate, differences in weather, the differences in sugars available, differences in genetic subclusters, differences in farmers. I mean, there's so many different things. And every single time that they look at the microbiota within each of these cocoa fermentations, they find that there's always different types, different species, different strains of that species. And so when you have those differences in the species itself, basically you're having different genes that are activated because of their genetic information or their DNA. Then you have different proteins that are made, and once you have different proteins, that means you have different flavors that are made, and once you have different flavors, that means that all of the beans are flavor profiles. Normally this isn't a big deal, right? Because what happens when you get your Hershey's bar, and the reason your Hershey bars taste the exact same, is because they have a formula. And so what they do is they get beans from all over the world, and they will then start mixing them all together. So they don't care. They'll get it from Ecuador, they'll get it from Peru, they'll get it from Colombia, Bolivia, and all these other different places, and they mix them together in certain ratios so that their flavor profile turns out to just be one, which is just chocolate, just that smooth whatever they're looking for. And they kind of classify and do some chemistry behind it in order to figure it out, but they make it so that it doesn't really matter as much. But what you're finding more commonly is single origin chocolate, which is basically the chocolate is located or found directly from one source. So Ecuadorian chocolate or Hawaiian chocolate or East Africa or whatever it is, basically they get it from like one country, and if not from one country, from one farm specifically. So those flavor profiles then start to matter a lot more in that regard, basically, because then you're trying to classify and understand, okay, is it fruity because it's from that nation and because of their soil and maybe it's something they're doing, or is it fruity because the microbial load that they happen to have within the cocoa fermentations actually changes the profile, and so therefore it's more allocated to be fruity than floral because they have Saccharomyces cerevisiae compared to Hanasporia, which is another type of yeast, for example.
This is almost essentially what they do with wine nowadays, where you can kind of smell it and taste it, taste the notes, figure out where it's from. Because there's actually professionals and people way more particular about their wine than I am that do that.
Yes.
Do that sort of Give
me the barefoot, I'll be fine.
Yeah, I mean, by 4 glasses or 3, we'll just say 3. I don't want to sound too lushy here. By 3 drinks, 3 glasses, it doesn't matter.
Oh no, exactly. But yeah, so that's the idea, and it's really funny because you've probably heard of like the different types of yeast that they use in wine, like a champagne yeast or like a blah blah blah. So those are it's a yeast strain specifically that's genetically engineered to do whatever that is looking for. So for example, champagne yeast, they're meant to be more CO2 production than normal, and they use a lot of sugar, and so therefore the champagne yeast gets that kind of more bubbly feel compared to I don't even know like another yeast because there's so many different ones, but like LaRue, which is a much more like a fruity flavor and supposed to really bring off those fruity off notes, but doesn't have as much CO2 production. So each of these strains does a different thing. So what if you could make those kind of same strains, for example, or those same ideas and those same flavor profiles, but for chocolate, so that it's not a natural fermentation, but more of a controlled fermentation, and not even just a controlled fermentation, but a controlled flavor profile every single time. Like that's something that I think would be really amazing, because if you start to know what the flavor profile is of chocolate from a natural production, there's so many different variables that go on to it that it would just be immense to be able to do that, because now you can make, a fruity chocolate, or you can make a
Yeah.
floral chocolate, or you can make a, really considerable amazing efforts to these people, because like that natural cause of what we were saying before, like what if Brazil is earthy, but let's say earthy isn't in the market. Well, now Brazilian single origin chocolate is at risk, which means that the farmers that are producing that chocolate are also at risk, and the companies too, obviously. But then it doesn't, then you're having this kind of like cascading effect of, okay, well, what if we can make Brazilian chocolate, but we can make Brazilian floral chocolate because we give them a packet of microbes that make that flavor, that flavor profile that's desirable.
That's amazing. I am hugely invested in your research now.
Me too, man.
I hope so. This actually might sound really ignorant. So I have two monitors, and I have one of them set up with I have two screens. Well, the second monitor has two web pages open, split in half here. One of them has your profile, and I always have my guest profile.
Oh,
Well, no. This is just gonna show my ignorance, because I asked that chocolate question only because
right.
we were talking about food science. I didn't even notice that you had chocolate researcher in your profile bio.
Yep, that's true. That's true.
Yeah. So I can see that now. I can see that. I heard it. That was just me being curious about chocolate. So yeah, I'm really glad that you're like heavily into that. That's fascinating. Oh my gosh. So how long do you have to do this? Like, do you have a timetable or anything like that? And I'm sorry if I'm like asking these questions, because now I'm like
no, you're good.
super interested. We're not even barely even talking about esports. We talked about it a little bit here, but
right. So that confirmation of the idea of like getting that all together, that thought process, that took a year by itself, because the problem was, my advisor, I love her to death, she's a great person, but she very much was just like, okay, I want you to do something in fermentation and chocolate, and I don't care what the hell you do, just do it. And it's obviously not like that, like she's much nicer about it, but
right,
it was more so of just you know I had no idea, because I came from food safety aspects, so like Listeria monocytogenes, Salmonella, E. coli. I knew a lot about like that sort of the microbiology side of things, and I didn't know so much about the fermentation aspect. So I had to take a lot of time to research these different things, look up what's been done, what's been recent, what's kind of the trend, basically, what hasn't even been thought of, and it's amazing because there's a lot, honestly, that had been applied to other places, specifically like beer, wine, cheese, and the like from there, but for some reason haven't been categorized or done in chocolate. One of the big things that's been very common to do is the genome sequencing, for example, of the microbes behind the beer and yeast, beer and wine yeast of Saccharomyces cerevisiae. Well, Saccharomyces cerevisiae is also used in chocolate fermentation, but nobody has looked at the genome behind it for some reason, because they just kind of have all accepted that it's like, oh, okay, it's chocolate, it's whatever, or they just don't know about it, honestly, because that's the biggest thing, is not knowing that chocolate is a fermented product, for example. And so one of the things that, it took that long, but now it's okay. The biggest question I have is, we're going to have a trip to go down to Ecuador to collect some samples. However, the biggest problem that I have is we want to do a lab scale model system of the chocolate fermentations. And if you've never seen these before, they are these big boxes that we kind of talked about, and they will put 300 to 500 kilograms. So couple hundred pounds
right, yeah,
of
yeah, yeah.
cocoa beans
It was like
into
two.
a
It's like
single
2 point.
box.
Is it 2.2 pounds per?
I want to say, yeah. So it's,
Yeah,
it's somewhere in like the 600 pounds or so of cocoa beans into
yeah,
one box. So imagine doing that in the lab is almost impossible, right? And
yeah.
controlling as we said, it's natural fermentation, so we have to make sure that we control airflow. We have to control what's the microbes that touching it. We have to look for contamination. We have to, because again, we want to make sure that we're not the ones effing it up. That if something goes wrong, we need to know that it wasn't something that we did due to contamination, or just poor handling of the actual cocoa beans itself. So what my first step of the project is to make a good model system that mimics the exact same thing as to what happens on site. And so if you go down to Ecuador and you get the cocoa beans from there, if I can make them, or make the fermentations in my lab, basically, with the exact same microbial composition and pH and temperature and time and quality of the fermentations that matches to that same on-site fermentation, then I've done a good job. But that's my first thing, is I have to get the model system, because once you get the model system, you can mess around with it and analyze whatever different variables that you want to look at. You can look at blah 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 blah. But if you don't have that model system, you can't really say, oh yes, I have done this thing, and I've done this influence. For example, there was a person, they did a model system for lab scale fermentations, and I was like, oh, I was really excited, like that would be great, because then I could just use their system. However, they used beans, their on-site beans versus their lab scale ones were 3-year differences. So everything that we mentioned before, microbial differences, hand differences, chemical differences, those are going to be completely separate beans, right? Like there's going to be completely separate fermentations. And so you can't use this model system, because it's not, even though the research was like, well, it looks like the same. It's not the same. Like, it's not. You can't just use bean, like, unless you told me that the beans were frozen. They weren't. But if you told me that maybe the beans were frozen, I could give like a leeway to it. But they didn't do that, and so it's very like, I gotta go do this myself and make it. And yeah, it's just, it'd be great if somebody else had already done it, then I don't have to do it.
You want something done, you do it yourself.
Yeah, so I got to do the model system. That'll take about half of a year or so. If there's no problems, Lord, please, no problems. But then everything else that I mentioned before is going to be about 2 years or so, and then it'll be the last year is going to write it all up and publish it. So
absolutely fascinating. When you publish it, let me know. Tweet it. Do something.
Oh yeah, no, definitely.
I want to read that. I know. I feel. I mean, this was the quickest 40 minutes I've ever had talking to someone, and like I feel like you haven't even scratched the surface of what you really could say, which is exactly fine. This podcast is not for the stuff that I can't understand.
Thank you for all those that are staying with us for this long. I appreciate it a lot.
Oh my gosh! So whenever you approach food,
yes,
just from a culinary standpoint, do you look at it different when you eat something? Do you look at it different? Do you taste it differently because you know more about the processes that goes into that sort of food, and also what it's doing inside your body, and if just various other factors, or is it just pretty much just food to you and you separate the science and you just enjoy the taste?
I think it kind of, there's definitely a half and a half. Like being a good scientist, especially in food science, has really made me a better cook, because you get to understand like why certain things went wrong. What does it need to do? Like a quick thing that everybody knows is like, let's say you're making a sauce, but the sauce doesn't thicken up. They don't know what the hell to do, and so they're like, well, maybe I can throw in some cheese, or maybe I can do this. And it's like, oh, but I know that you just need a coagulant. So when you need to do that, you just mix together a slurry of flour and water, like, and the reason that this happens is because you're having the starch particles, and the starch particles like coagulate everything together, and so it thickens up from there. Like there's definitely that, and then there's the other part of me that's just like, dude, I could really go for some barbecue baby back ribs right now, and I don't even care or like whatever about it. So there's definitely like it's really funny. Like I haven't really noticed a trend of like if I do it versus certain things, but it's definitely like when I'm home cooking, I know like a lot more about like what's the science and what I'm doing, and I make sure to like not oversalt things, or like make sure to season it properly, or whatever the hell that it is. But then it's like when you're going around town, you're like, okay, what do I want to eat? You're like, damn, I would love some like tacos right now. Like that would just sounds delicious.
Like appetite is still appetite regardless.
Oh, right, yeah. 100%. Like I don't know if you've been to Applebee's, but like they have the 9 o'clock, they have these like late night apps after 9 o'clock, like all their appetizers are half off.
Yeah.
And my girlfriend would get off sometimes at 9 o'clock, and so we'd be like I haven't had made dinner just due to scrims and busy and blah blah blah, and so I'm like, hey, do you want to just get these half price apps? And we know that we do not want to look at the nutritional facts, because
not a chance.
We are not going to get the half price apps, but we know that we want the half price apps because they taste fucking freaking delicious. It's just like so yeah, it's hard. But
I don't know. I'm the same way. I'm the same way. Even going through the grocery store at nighttime, because everything's 24 hours. Almost everything's 24 hours in Vegas. So you can just get, you're at 3 a.m, you crave some cheese sticks, and none of the restaurants are open. Just go to the grocery store. You're fine. Just go there. But yeah, I don't ever worry about the nutrition whenever I'm at 3 a.m. When I get 3 a.m. cravings, because there's nothing good ever made at 3 a.m. No one's in their kitchen at 3 a.m. It's like, I'd really go for some broccoli right now. No. You don't do that.
You're going for the pizza. You're going for the cheesy things, the high fat, high carbohydrate. Yeah.
Yeah.
That is exactly right.
So yeah, I actually do cook quite a bit. I love cooking, and I actually go with the whole Anthony Bourdain approach, where I like cook to experience culture. So I try to cook from various dishes from various regions around the world. That's how I love. One of my favorite dishes is cooking ramen, because cooking ramen, like authentic ramen, is like a nonstop process. Like, you don't really slow down.
Oh, yeah.
And it gives me so much more appreciation for A, whenever I go order ramen, and B, whenever like I see someone cooking ramen, or I know that or just eating ramen after I cook it is like, I really work for this, and this is just how it is. And you kind of get I'm gonna be honest, I don't know exactly. I don't really know like Japanese culture. I don't really know it to a T or anything like that. I'm not going to claim to be a historian of Japanese culture or anything like that. But through cooking
ramen,
not
a weeb?
I am.
What? Heck is what?
I watched Dragon Ball Z. That's pretty cool, right?
That's hip, right? I think.
Oh, that is the one. So, Dragon Ball Super, I even watched with the subtitles. So that's pretty.
Oh.
That's about the first. That's the only one I've watched with subtitles.
But no, yeah, you were saying.
Yeah. I don't really know much about Japanese culture. I know that part about it, as far as like the Americanization of that culture. But I feel like I have some sort of knowledge of what it takes to be a chef. Only on a light scale. I'm not even going to claim that I know what it takes to be a Japanese chef of any sort, because I have seen I've seen cooking competition shows. I have seen Japanese restaurants. And I know I know they earn their pay. That is for sure. But ramen,
it is definitely a labor of love.
Love is those labor and love are two very big key words that go into Japanese cooking, because even at the lowest grade ramen that I can make, which again I do try to make everything authentic. I even make my own broth. I try to do everything. I don't make my own noodles, which I know they do. That's a thing too. They make their own noodles, which is really good. I love
homemade noodles.
I love homemade, freshly made noodles. They're so good. But doing all that, like, I feel like I can get just some sort of semblance of their culture, of their ethic, of of something understanding. Because you can do that with a lot of like stereotypical American culture food, like like McDonald's. Everything, like, we are very. I feel like food is very reflective of how a country dictates their day-to-day pace. We have fast food. I mean, everybody has fast food now, but we kind of pioneered that because capitalist society. And I'm not gonna. This isn't gonna be one of those where I crap on capitalism or anything like that. But
capitalism,
capitalist society. Work, earn paycheck, money, consume, things like that. Do it fast. You don't got time to eat. We got fast food for that now. And it's just kind of a reflection of what we do. Now we do have a lot more different culture now with taking care of our food. But fast food is still very prevalent. And I try to get that sort of feeling of some sort of semblance of culture through different foods. The last one I made was from the Basque Country over in the border of Spain and France. Oof. It was so I was cooking it for a vegan, so I didn't have any fish in there, but I really wanted some fish in there. But that was the first time I made a roux sauce, which is like French. I think it's French. It's like a French sauce, and I had to use what is it called? Saffron. And I did not realize how expensive saffron was, and apparently per ounce it's more expensive than gold. Mm-hmm. So yeah. It was a fun adventure for me, and now I'm probably never going to buy saffron again, because it was like $13 for about 4 pinches.
Yeah,
but man,
it is really expensive, and I don't know. Like, I've had one dish that was with saffron. And it was at like a fancy restaurant, and I was just like, I just ate because they put it on top, and I was like, I just ate like $200. I feel like.
Yeah, literally just eating money. It's good. It's interesting good. It's not like stereotypical good, because I don't think I had ever had saffron. I've never been able to. I don't go to restaurants that typically I afford saffron. Though, like, I do splurge every now, especially Vegas, because like Vegas, you can kind of have all sorts of things, because like they want to like, obviously they want to support any kind of eatery here, and like that's high class, low class, middle class. It doesn't matter. So like there are restaurants that use saffron here that I have not stepped into yet, but I probably will soon because my anniversary is coming up, and Morimoto is one of my favorite chefs. And he has a restaurant here that's I do plan on spending a pretty penny only for my anniversary. Then after that, I'm going to save my money because I'm going to have to after that meal. But yeah, I usually don't eat that expensive of food, and
no, exactly. I don't think a lot of people do, honestly.
Yeah, saffron. Yeah, that one really threw me out. So I just I really like that's one of the things. So, another reason why I was really excited to get you on here, because I do have that fascination with just science in general, and
right.
And just everything like it. But I love cooking, and I wanted to get that aspect of it. I'm never gonna cook chocolate in my entire life. Even if I have the opportunity, I'm probably just going to give a peace sign and say this is hard and leave.
Right. Hope for the best.
I'll just go do something else. Man, thank you so much for explaining all that to me.
Yeah, no.
Like, you could not have rambled too much on this subject. This is by far the most educated one I've had so far.
I'm glad to help out, honestly.
Super grateful.
I love doing this type of stuff where basically we can just explain different aspects. I mean, there's times in which I've had to sit down and have conversations with people about what's a GMO, what does natural mean, what does organic mean, what is what is this fad diet and the keto and all these other so many people want to know these things, and there's definitely a need, so much so that I'm hopefully going to be starting to produce a podcast with a friend of mine coming up this fall when she gets back from Mexico, but that's the idea, is to try to just kind of put out like all these answers or these myths about food science and what does it mean in the bigger part, because as many people think that it is, it's like these big companies and trying to do in capitalism again, but it's not to that matter. Like food science, the core of food science is to make products either better for you, more efficiently in general, more everlasting, or taste better. And so there's nothing there that's like horrible or trying to I'm trying to screw you over or something like that.
Right. I do want to get your opinion real quick.
Yeah, no, of course.
So you were talking about fad diets, which, by the way, I love fad diets, as in I like using myself as experimentation and then go back to my own thing. Because the last one I tried was this keto thing, and I ended up throwing up, and I was like, I don't like that. I see why you guys like it. I don't. I just got sick because I think I was just eating too much fat one day. I think I don't know. It was a weird, fad diets in general are just weird, and that's another topic. I do want to ask you. So, you were talking about making things more efficient, making things better.
Right.
There is a new fad. I won't really call it a fad. It's more of a fad among vegans, vegetarians, but like artificial burgers, these Beyond Burgers and Impossible Burgers.
Yes.
What is your opinion on that? Because I love them, but and I also feel like if we can just make stuff like that, then maybe it could help a food shortage of some sort. But I do know there's always going to be a drawback to something. But you're educated far more than I am. I want your opinion.
So there's goods and bads of it behind everything, and this is in no way an official opinion behind anybody whatsoever other than myself.
Never want to take it, but
But yeah, so the way that I see it is I'm all for it. I think that sort of the the quote unquote fake meat is great in the aspects of you're using less resources, it's more sustainable. There's a whole different side of it of how there's the science behind it, of how they made it quote unquote bleed and taste good, and I mean one of the things that my girlfriend and we strive to do is that every week we try to have a whole vegetarian, and if we can possibly then a vegan meal every single week, or a whole day basically dedicated to that, where we'll try to limit the amount of animal source protein that we happen to get out of it. So there's the good side of there's sustainability, there's the idea of using less resources, or you can get more bang for your buck, and the idea of more farm space used compared to cattle or chicken or the like from there. There's the downside that I've heard that I've had the Impossible Burger, and honestly I can tell you I tasted no difference whatsoever. Mind you, it was at a fancy place in Las Vegas, because at the time it was 2 years ago, and these things came for $30 a burger.
Wow.
So those
went down a lot.
Oh yes, they in the past 2 years, and they have immensely gone down. If not in the past 10 years, about like I think it was I want to say 7 or 8 years ago when they first made the original quote unquote like fake meat burger. It
Yeah.
cost $100,000 or something, like a
Sheesh.
ridiculous amount of money.
I guess there's only one in
Um,
the world. I mean, I guess
Right,
might
at
as
that
well.
time, right? Like you might
Yeah.
as well you
Yeah.
invest
Yeah.
a lot of money, but now they've made it into a much more streamlined process. That Burger King I think is the biggest one, and then there's a lot of other fast food places that are now picking this up. But Burger King is the one I know that they are going to sell. I think it's a Beyond Meat
Yes.
Whopper, I want to say, but
Yeah.
it's going to be like $5 or $6 for a Whopper, or maybe it's $8. I've never been to Burger King honestly, so I can't tell you the prices, but it's under $10 in general for a completely similar, if not the exact same burger. And I mean, like, yes, there's a little bit of taste differences, but the mouthfeel, the overall how you experience it is pretty much the same. The biggest thing is the taste, because you just feel like there's a difference between the meat and the non-meat, and they're working on that, right? Like, there's still
There's a
in
texture
process to make
difference.
that right
Yeah,
to make that
because
bigger and better.
I make Beyond Burgers about because so Impossible Burgers, they're not for public consumption yet. Public or public well, you can't buy them in public. I guess is what I'm trying to say.
Right,
My
right.
words are leaving me. Beyond, you can. Those are in supermarkets, Whole Foods, things like that. Impossible Burgers are strictly commercial, like restaurants,
Right.
places like that. And I think Beyond, they're now getting into restaurants as well. So
Yes.
uh, impossible so far, because there are yeah, there's like a lot of restaurants here that sell them. And yeah, like you said, various fast food chains that now sell Impossible Burgers. But I have tasted like the Impossible Burger is probably the closest to the an actual burger I've tasted thus far. The Beyond has a little bit of a texture thing to it that they need to get over if they want to completely replicate the burger. But yeah, it is pretty exciting. I want to go have a fast food one to see how it is because
Right, to see the differences.
yeah, because the ones I make at home, I make the Beyond Burgers at home, but of course I've never made the Impossible Burger. But the Impossible Burgers at a restaurant are super. They're great. They're really good. The Beyond Burgers at home are good too, but yeah, it looks like they're very rare burgers because they don't really get not red on the inside.
Right, right.
Yeah, I want
The
to.
downside. Oh, sorry. I was just going to say
Yeah,
the
go for it.
downside that I've seen with a lot of these things, though, is that the substitutions that they use in order to make the things taste very much the same, feel very much the same, is that they have a lot of high fat stuff. So coconut oil is, I think, one of their biggest sources that they use for their plant based fat. And coconut oil has a lot of saturated fat, a lot of like just there's a lot of sodium inside of it. So it's one of those things that,
Yeah,
although yes, it's plant based, that doesn't necessarily mean that it's going to be healthier. It's a way to definitely be, it's more sustainable, and hopefully it'll be cheaper in the process because plants are easier and cheaper to make than animals are right now. But it's still one of those things that it doesn't mean that it's healthier or better for you, other than the idea of not having as much animal fat but having more protein, or sorry, plant-based fats.
yeah.
The other downside too is that, and this is just a more scientific thing, is that animal protein, when you digest and metabolize animal protein, it is more biochemically active, which basically means that you're going to use more of it in your conversions of that protein from one to the next than it is compared to plant protein. So, for example, you might be able to see this, but like when you go to your nutrition facts and you look on the back, right, and you look at the protein levels, you'll see sometimes, like if it's like 13 grams of protein, you'll see 26% of your daily intake value, for example. But if you go to like edamame, and it has so it's a 1 to 2 ratio, so it's like 13%, 26 multiplied by 2. But sometimes if it's like edamame, for example, which is all plant protein, or pea protein in particular, it'll say like 5 grams, but it'll only be 7% of your daily intake value. And the reason for that is just because you need more plant protein in order to be equal to the amount of animal protein that you would digest and absorb and metabolize in the exact same way. Um,
Oh,
so it's one of those downsides that it's like it's great that there is um, plant protein available, but the problem is you need to have more plant protein to get the exact same amount of protein uh, compared to animal protein. So that's why
yeah.
it's like when you have like your whey versus your protein shakes or whatever.
Hmm.
In my opinion, it's better to go for the whey protein because you need less of the whey protein compared to the pea protein for the amount of like conversion rates, basically.
Fascinating. All right, AJ. What else you gotta say, man? You want to talk about anything else? You want to wrap it? It's an hour. Again, this is probably the fastest like the fastest time has went by, because like I don't get the chance to sit down with anybody to actually have an educated like conversation like this. Like, don't get me wrong, like my like. I mean, I have educated friends, but it's like they don't really talk about food biology because they don't know.
Oh yeah, no, it's difficult. I mean, everybody's an expert in their own, opinions or the like from there. But you're free to ask any questions, whether it's about. I mean, we haven't talked about League as much, and I don't know how much the podcast is garnered towards that. So if we want to talk on that, and we'll call it a day after that. It's up to you. That's fine. Or we can do honestly whatever. I'm happy with anything.
Man, the podcast is geared toward like getting to know personalities in the esports industry, and obviously you're there. We talked about it, and of course I'm gonna have an intro to this, introing who you are, and
we spent 40 minutes not talking about esports. Let's go. Hell yeah!
You know what? That's fine. That's fine, because I mean there's a whole Twitter. There's all sorts of ways to talk about esports. There's not any ways for anybody in esports to talk about something that they're not in esports about. Like, or they're not. I don't feel like everyone is 100% esports. And like, as much as there are a couple of people that live and breathe and eat all this stuff, esports, it's like, come on, like do you like scary movies? Like, you want to talk about something? Like, I'm kind of burnt out on esports right now.
Yeah,
but like,
I can understand that.
No, it's and don't get me wrong. I love talking about esports.
Of course.
It's like, it's obviously a passion. That's one of the reasons why I started the podcast. But the other reason is like, I know there's more out there, and like, what's to be said about esports hasn't been said already, honestly.
Right. Exactly.
Ooh,
there's so many people that do so many different things that it's difficult.
But chocolate, though, man, like. No one's been on here to give me a talking to like that. So
that's true.
That's good.
You gotta hook them in with that.
That's what I'm saying. I can talk to esports about anybody. I can't talk about chocolate just to anybody. I have to have it like there. That's part of you. So it's like somebody should get to know that. I mean, that's part of you. It's you're a coach.
Right.
Yeah, you're a coach for Illinois, but it's like at the same time you're doing this kick-ass chocolate research. What? No, somebody should know that.
Right. We were laughing because our previous coach, Gino, or Noob, I think he went by when he went to the ULOL CLOL thing.
What was his ginormous Noob?
Ginormous Noob, yeah. So he was actually a master's student. He's now a PhD student somewhere in New York, but he did some research that was just like, when you talked to him about it, I was just like, dude, I would have imagined that you're doing this research, or like Ito, who is our new coach coming in, he's a physical therapy student that's coming in. So it's really great for us because we have some players that have had like hand issues, for example. And so we can go to him and say, hey, Ito, like, what do we need to do in order to have better hand issues, or like, there's stretches that we need to do, or oh, hey, like maybe you're just getting done with a hard workout and you're like, hey, I got a cramp, like help.
Yeah, which all that stuff is becoming more prevalent in now professional teams. Like, you have personal trainers on professional teams now. I don't know how it is with Collegiate yet, but I know there's some places that have fully staffed Collegiate staffs, like just so much background.
UCI Maryville.
Okay, get it going with UIUC. You already have the resource of. I know it's hard.
Trying.
We're
trying.
I know.
No.
Collegiate's hard. I get it.
Yes.
No. Again, that's another,
I didn't realize
that's another topic that we can just hash over with almost every guest I have on here, because there's a struggle that is unique, and there's a struggle that is just a blanket over the entire esports industry of the collegiate system, and funding and motivation, all that.
Right.
That's we're not to that point yet, and I totally get that, but.
Right.
Yeah, man. That stuff is still really prevalent, though, and that's what's like. We were talking about at the very beginning of this, where there's like before there was a lot of engineers and computer science majors, and now people are getting in here when there's already a professional esports scene to get into. Is like, we can be a business major now. It's been over 4 years that esports has been a big thing, where it can be a viable income, a viable living.
Right.
And the people 4 years ago probably could have looked at that and like, well, you can be a business and be in business management and be well off in esports now. There's plenty of avenues that way. So of course you're going to see more of that. And that's another thing, physical therapy. I know that's going to be more prevalent in esports as far as actual majors go, because in
how to take care of people, how to do, you know, nutrition, how do you do like going to the gym and the like from there. I mean, like how many times do you see Cloud9 post about them going to the gym together every single day or whatever?
And not to mention like eating properly. I mean, obviously eating has an effect on how you function and just in general. And obviously working out does the same thing. So yeah, all that. I mean, there's so much into well-being and how you function mentally. And of course, like mental is like, I'm not going to say all of it. It's at least half the battle in just esports. Like playing a video game is a lot of mentality, which obviously, I mean, you have to have a lot of hand-eye coordination, dexterity, things like that. Equipment, obviously, but
yes, very much so.
But yeah, man, so cool. Yeah, I love the science behind various topics, especially when it relates to esports. And man, that could be another hour discussion. I don't know if I'm here for another hour.
Yeah, no, I feel you on that. But I mean, if you ever want to talk about things, or if you want to just talk about I don't know, some random, like I said, any of the non-GMO or blah blah blah. Like
I would love to. Yeah, part 2.
More than that. Part 2, yeah, exactly.
For sure. AJ, for now, though, I think we should part ways. Do you have anything you want to plug? Any shout-outs you want to give? Anything like that?
Watch the University of Illinois. Join us at Illini Esports. We have some sort of Discord or something like that, where we have a Twitter and stuff like that. That's not my area. But you can follow me on Twitter if you like food science. I also post, like, anime and funny memes and jokes and crap like that. It's I Sink Ships. Sink as in the idea of, like, syncing two things together, like a podcast, like syncing that.
Hey.
But yeah, you guys can follow me there and ask any questions, or if you want to know more, just feel free to hit me up and I can tell you all you want to know about chocolate. And in 2 years' time, because everybody always asks this, in 2 years' time, feel free to stop by the University of Illinois. You could sample the chocolate that I will have ready and available for all of you. Because everybody's like, "When are you guys gonna do samples?" And I'm like, "Dude, I haven't even I haven't even thought of the project by now. Like, there's no way I'm gonna have samples."
You were talking about a year and a half year and a half for just the framework, and I was like, "Oh man, I probably didn't have chocolate ready yet. I wouldn't even bother with that part." But oh my god, my
colleague does have chocolate, and he'll be running sensory stuff, I think, next year too, because he works on the roasting aspect, that kind of that thing that we mentioned before. And he like I said, every single day, it's so funny that he is not doing the sensory yet, but he's making his samples, and I'll come in and I'm like, it smells like baking today. Like, what are we making, boys? It's really
man. So this is just going to be a quick note, real quick. I had a partner who was going to be a chocolatier, went to college to be a chocolatier, and we took a little trip over to CIA, which is the Culinary Institute of America over in California, Sonoma Valley or Sonoma County. Yeah, Sonoma County, California. And we got into there, and that's where Ghirardelli makes their chocolate. Oh my gosh,
they're crazy people.
Honestly. It was heaven to my senses. Oh, it was good. I hope to see your chocolate there one day. I'm gonna buy it.
Well, if it's not gonna be them, it's gonna be Barry Calvin, because I would love to work for Barry Calvin. I'll tell you that.
Fair enough. AJ, thank you so much for being on. I'm gonna link you on the
thank you
Twitter.
So much. Appreciate
I'll link you on that Twitter, and I'll link UIUC's esports account as well, and we'll call it a day. And we'll be back for part 2, because there's infinite amount of knowledge that I feel like I can tap here, and I'm more than if you're willing, I will listen.
Yeah, no, of course. Gotta listen to what the listeners want and see what they want to know more about. Have like a letter discussion or like a write-in or something.
I'm gonna be honest. This one's selfish. I don't care what they want. I want to know more about this, and I will just put it on my YouTube anyways. All right, AJ. Thank you so much, man.
Thank you, Figgis. Appreciate it.
Have a good one, man.
You too.
That's AJ Taylor. That is enthusiasm. I love that. This was a great conversation. Walked away much smarter, feeling much smarter. Technically, I don't even know if I'm smarter. I mean, I do feel smarter. I love the knowledge of chocolate, because actually I was talking to my partner about the origins of chocolate. She didn't give me a very specific answer. She gave me a better answer that I had, but then, I had to ask somebody who's overly qualified for it. AJ, that's the person. Now I know all about chocolate, or at least all that my small brain can probably comprehend about chocolate. But thank you very much, AJ. I'm very glad you're on the show. That was an amazing conversation. I hope to have you on again. And I hope you finish your project with the success you're looking for. I'm really looking forward to it, because I'm going to buy some of your chocolate. It's going to be awesome. I might even go to Illinois to get some, because Chicago's pretty cool. I haven't been to Illinois too many times, but I would go there for some specially made esports chocolate. So just look forward to that one. Thank you very much for listening. My name is Joshua Fekes Quest. You can follow me on Twitter at twitter.com/Fekes, P-H-E-Q-E-S. And if you like what you hear, like, share, subscribe, do all that good stuff. Leave a comment in the comment section below. Give me a suggestion. I'm going to work on those graphics. I swear to anything holy, I will. I'm getting more motivated every day. I tell myself that. And one day it will happen. And I will have a webcam hooked up here for your viewing pleasure. Once again, thank you very much. I'll see you next week. Hopefully, it'll be on time. And it'll be at Friday, 9 a.m. like it usually is. Once again, sorry for this one being a little bit late. But again, better late than never. Either way, I feel like I'm rambling. Go ahead and sign off here. Thank you very much for listening. Bye-bye.